Okay, I'm going to try and make this really quick and simple. The V6 hot end, it's pretty much a standard, and there's lots of clones out there. You got your heat sink, your heat break or throat, depending on who you talk to, and your heat block and your nozzle, okay? This is a Triangle Lab V6, just the standard one, except it's got a plated copper nozzle. That's just what I've been using and I prefer it. So the heatsink that they send has this little clip that goes in the top, and I had a lot of problems with this popping out. So your Bowden tube goes in the top, and then you put a clip in there like this. Okay, this tube kept on coming out. So what I did was I printed thicker clips and haven't had a problem since. So that's what I'd suggest doing if you get this particular version. Okay, so with this one and with this other heatsink type you can get, which you put one of these in to the top. Okay, it screws in the top. Put your tube in through there. That might hold better. I don't know. I haven't tested it yet myself. But it's basically the same otherwise. And then there's this. This is known as the short distance, which is for a direct feed. So you would put your extruder, like the BMG type, clamps right onto this. So it holds it in there perfectly good. Your filament just goes straight in there. The bottoms are all the same, okay? So your Bowden tube comes through the heatsink, and then it goes into your heat break. So there's 3 different types, maybe more actually, 4 or 5 different types of heat breaks you can get. Right here you see an all metal. So with this one here, the Bowden tube goes down just a short ways, so it's about that much. So it just goes in there like that. All the rest is metal. A lot of people use this. I use it, and they say that PLA is probably not that good with these. Could get clogged up easier. I haven't had a problem with that myself yet. This one here is the 4.1 millimeter bore. So your Bowden tube comes in through your heatsink, goes it's the opposite way, comes in the top of this, goes all the way through, okay? And then it hits the top of the nozzle, so that there's no gap other than from the nozzle to your Bowden tube, okay? This is how I had originally been using my V6, and the tube kept popping out. That's part of the reason why I switched to an all metal, which didn't actually help with that particular problem, but my retractions are lower, and I don't know, I like it. I like that. This would work fine, except you got to make sure that your Bowden tube is clamped in there real good and doesn't move, because if it moves, you're going to be getting a gap here, and your filament's going to build up, and it's going to clog up. That happened to me a bunch of times. Okay, there's this Ptfe-lined tube, they call it. This one here is, it uses a standard 4 millimeter Ptfe, but basically you've heard of the hot end fix. That's what this does basically by itself, okay? So this goes into the heat block, pushes up against the nozzle, but this can't go through, okay? So you can put it in there, leave a slight bit sticking out, okay? And when you screw that in there, it's going to clamp between the nozzle. I would throw this piece away, and I would put in some actual good Capricorn tubing, this blue stuff, because it resists heat better. So you can print like PETG and stuff like that, okay? So this is basically a hot end fix built right in. You can get these smaller with a 3 millimeter bore, and then you need to put in these, like this thin, really thin 3 millimeter stuff. You can't use your regular Bowden tube. So depending on which one you get, where you ordered it from, you'll have to use one of the regular or the smaller Capricorn tube is what I would suggest. Okay, so those are basically your options. You got all metal. That's another all metal. Your 4mm bore straight through, and your Ptfe-lined. So why would you want these? Well, they basically just do all the same thing. It's just this is like to try and prevent clogging for PLA. People may want to choose something like this or the 4mm bore for PLA. There's also bimetal, where there's a stainless steel tube in the middle, and then you got copper or some other material on each side. That helps to conduct the heat better on each side, but not in the middle, which is what you want. So when I set these up, what I do is I put a little bit of thermal compound on the nozzle threads into the heat block, but not on this side of the heat block, but on this part that goes into the heat sink. I put some on there. That way, if the heat comes up through this heat break, it's going to have real good contact to the heat sink itself, so that the heat will transfer better there and better to the nozzle, but not as much between the heat block and the heat break. You don't want to put it on there. Alright, that's my little explanation and my little tip.